What do you really want? What, if we achieved in this program, would make this the best program you ever attended? What, if we achieved, would make the investment that you put into this program worth 100x of what you spent? Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. You know what time it is. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. Hope everyone is doing awesome. Hope everyone is rocking it. We're getting about halfway through the year and you are just on target for what you want to achieve. And if not, remember, it's never too late, right? Never too late to reset and get very clear about what you want. That's one of the first questions when I'm interviewing new clients or people that want to work with me in either my group programs or my one-on-one programs, is I ask them a simple question. What do you really want? What, if we achieved in this program, would make this the best program you ever attended? What, if we achieved, would make the investment that you put into this program worth 100x of what you spent? And it's funny because as Chief Information Security Officers, security professionals, and people that want to continually excel and improve and get better at our craft, I'm often amazed that we're very focused on technical. I'll go in and talk to a lot of folks and I go, what do you want? Well, I want to get this cert, or I want to get that cert, or I want to take this course, or I want to learn this technology. Great. I didn't ask what skills you wanted. What I really want to know is go a little deeper. What is it that you really want? And then here's the more important question. Where are you actually going? If you went and took your current life right now, and you looked at the last 5 years and the current trajectory that you're on, where does that take you in 5, 10, 15 years from now? And here's the most important part of it. Is that taking you where you want to go? Is that really where you want to end up? I see so many people that work in the same job, doing the same thing, and they wake up at 40, 50, 60, and they're like, that's not what I really wanted. So no matter what age you are, it's important that you get very clear about where you are, your current trajectory. If you do not change anything, if you continue on the exact same path you're on, where does that take you in 5, 10, 15 years? And is that where you really want to go? And the trick is, if it's not, which don't worry, most people it isn't, you need to start changing your trajectory. You need to start making some adjustments. Now, here's the crazy part. The adjustments you need to make might not be huge. If you go in and you look at somebody who's traveling from New York to California, if you just go in and you change the current route they're on just by a few degrees, just a little tweak, 3 or 4 degrees, and then you continue on that path, you'll wind up in Seattle, Canada, or the North Pole, depending on how many degrees. It's not a lot. It's not like you're going to go 90, right? Because that's going to take you off. You just make a few degrees, just a couple of minor changes, and you play that out over a long distance, and you end up in a completely different spot. So very important to always keep asking yourself. And one of the scenes I always remind myself of, and I ask myself fairly regularly, Eric, where are you going? Where are you going? It's from Bad Boys for Life, and it's a scene where Will Smith is sitting on the bench with the lieutenant, and the lieutenant proceeds to tell him a story. He goes, there's this monk walking up a mountain. And as he's walking up a mountain, this man on a horse comes flying down like out of control, and the monk has to jump into the bushes to avoid being run over. And the monk gets up and sort of brushes himself off and screams, where are you going? And the man on the horse looks back and says, I don't know. Ask the horse. And then you're sort of puzzled for a moment, like, what's going on here? And then the captain proceeds. He says, the horse represents all of our fears, all of our concerns, all of our resentment, everything that we have built up over the years that essentially has not only made us who we are, but has taken away a lot of our power. And those things are often driving us and controlling us and taking us to areas where we don't want to go. So it's a really good question for you to spend some time journaling or thinking about it on where are you really going? Where are you really heading? And most importantly, what do you really want? And that was all to tee up this question, which is the topic of this episode. Do you really want to be a CISO? Do you really deep down inside know what a Chief Information Security Officer is, what is required, the changes that you have to do, who you have to become to be a world-class CISO? And is that what you really want? Is that what you enjoy and love to do? Because I'm seeing this trend in cyber where almost everyone views the progression path. If you work in cybersecurity and you want to achieve the ultimate, this is not true, by the way, but this is what people believe, false belief. But one of the biggest false beliefs in cybersecurity, one of the biggest misconceptions that people have in cybersecurity is to achieve the ultimate is to be a Chief Information Security Officer, to have the CISO title. And the problem is that causes many, many people to get frustrated, to get angry, and to go down the wrong path. Because the reality is this: a Chief Information Security Officer is completely different than a security engineer. World-class security engineers that are given the CISO title because either they force it, demand it, or the company thinks they earned it, are often the most frustrated, miserable, angry people, because you're put in a position that you don't know what it is, you don't want to do it, and therefore you get frustrated because you're not very good at it. So I just want to give you the reality of a Chief Information Security Officer and make sure you recognize, is that what you really want? Now, the world needs a lot of CISOs, but the world also needs a lot of world-class security engineers. But let's break it down even further. Do you know what the world really needs? For you to show up and be authentic, to do and live out your purpose. So if your purpose is to be a security engineer, own it. You can make a lot of money. I know world-class security engineers that make a lot more money than CISOs. I know a lot of world-class security engineers that have a lot more respect and a lot more prestige in companies than any CISO does. And I know CISOs that make a lot of money, and I know CISOs that have a lot of prestige. So when I hear people go, why do you want to become a Chief Information Security Officer? The reasons are not logical. Well, Eric, I want more respect. Well, you can do that as a security engineer. Well, I want to make more money. You can do that as a security engineer. I want people to listen to me. You can do that as a security engineer. So I just want to make sure that if you're stepping in and making the decision to become a chief information security officer, you understand the realities. First reality, and we're starting to see this. If you've been watching the news, there are now cases where there were breaches, and because they feel that the chief information security officer hid, misled, or potentially lied about what happened and what occurred, they're actually piercing the corporate veil and going after them for liability. Right? A lot of folks go, I didn't sign up for that. Right? I sort of joke, I have a presentation I give that's called Everyone Wants to be a CISO Until You Go to Jail. What you have to remember is, if you are truly, now there's fake CISOs, right, where you have the title but you're not actually an officer. But if you are actually a chief officer, so it doesn't matter what the middle letters are, whether it's chief executive officer, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, or chief information security officer. If your title begins with a C and ends with an O, if you are truly a chief officer and a real one, where you are registered as a chief officer with the company, you need to recognize that you have corporate responsibility and individual liability. And if that's new to you, let me quickly explain. There are officers of the company that are ultimately responsible for running the company, especially if you're publicly traded. If those officers lie, mislead, or provide false information to the public that could alter the stock price and basically mislead investors in any way, shape, or form, they are not necessarily protected under the corporate entity. Most employees, if you work at a company and you make a mistake, somebody can sue the company, they can't sue you. That's called the corporate veil, and it's a method of protection and reason why some people like to work for companies. But as an officer of the company, if you personally did things that could hurt the stock price, hurt the company, or mislead anybody who's potentially investing, they can do what's called piercing the corporate veil, and they can hold you individually liable and come after you for both civil or criminal action. I know a lot of folks didn't even think about that when becoming a CISO, right? So that's one thing to think about. And there's ways around that. You get insurance, you get E&O, you get protection mechanism. There's a lot of ways that you can still protect yourself for doing that. But that's important to recognize that if you are truly going to be a chief officer in the information security realm, that you could have a completely different level of liability associated with it. What you say, what you communicate, and what you put out, you could be held legally responsible and liable for those words and those actions that you perform. So that's first thing you want to make sure you're aware of. Second, the reality of being a CISO is you're a business person. You are a business person that's focused primarily, your number one job, if you are a true. Now, I have people come back and go, oh no, Eric, I'm a chief officer, chief information security officer, and I still do technical, I still do everything I did before. No, you're not. You have the title because you, like I said, either bullied, complained, or they felt like you earned it. But if you are doing technical, tactical work and you do not have corporate representative, if you're not actually a corporate officer, you are not really a CISO. You have a title, you can put it on a business card, you can put it on an email header, but between you, me, and everyone else in the company, they've done it for various other reasons, but you are not actually viewed and you are not actually performing the role of a true chief information security officer. And that's where companies struggle today. And this actually gives you a lot of opportunity because everyone always says, oh, you need to be a CISO to become a CISO. Actually, there's an interesting shift that's occurring. Right now, many companies that are looking for a chief information security officer actually want deputies, directors, or managers who's never actually had the title before. And the reason is this, and I heard this directly from executives and recruiters and HR. Eric, most of the people we're getting that have CISO experience or claim they have CISO experience and currently hold the CISO title are not actually CISOs. And when we bring them in, it is a disaster. Therefore, we realize we have to train or give somebody who's never been before but knows what it is, understands business, and is a true business person. And that's why they're looking for folks who don't actually have the title, but who have the experience. Because the problem today is not everyone, but a lot of people have the title, but don't have the experience. And let me ask you a question. If you're hiring a CISO, which would you rather? Somebody with the experience that can do the job, but doesn't have the title? Or somebody that has the title, doesn't really have the experience, and really can't do the job? And that's the dilemma that we're in right now, because so many people misunderstood that a chief information security officer is a business person. Your primary responsibility is business, is to grow the business, to make the business profitable, or in some cases with cyber, to prevent the company from losing money, to prevent the company from having to pay ransoms, from having major fines from breaches, and other things along there. It's still financially driven. Right? Ideally, you want to grow revenue, but if you can do things to stop the decrease or bleeding out of revenue, that also fits under that category. So the next reality of being a CISO is you're a business person. You're operating, thinking, and acting like a business officer. And that's important, because if you love techie, if you love the bits and the bytes and the firewalls and the thrill of incident response and threat hunting and finding attackers and correlating data and doing all that stuff, awesome. The world needs you. Companies need you. But if that's what you love to do, and that's where I started, what do you love to do? What do you want to do? What do you enjoy doing? Because that's going to ultimately drive whether you stay as a security engineer or you move into a CISO position. Wanting a title, which is one of the biggest drivers today, is one of the dumbest reasons why you should go after being a CISO, because if you love the technical, you're not going to love the CISO. A CISO is not a technical role. It is not on the same career track. You are switching gears. You have technical and you have business career tracks. Security engineers are here on one career track, and CISOs are chief officers on a business track. Two completely different tracks. So if you're a security engineer and you're switching over to becoming a CISO, you're changing career tracks. You're drastically changing the trajectory of your career and where you're heading. You are going to be doing a completely different job. That's why so many companies today want somebody who's been directors or deputy CISOs or ISOs or those types of jobs, because they understand and know business. They know how to interact with the businesses, and therefore they have the experience even though they don't have the title. Companies are realizing if you've never had experience running a business, managing a business, working with business units, it's going to be very hard for you to be a CISO. It's going to be very hard for you to switch gears. That's why when I work with you, if you join one of my programs, one of the higher end programs, what I offer is a resume review. And one of the first things I do is we gut your CV. In some cases, we burn it to the ground and we start over again. And the reason is simple. If you've been a security engineer and that's what you've always done, and those are the jobs you've always gotten, your CV is going to be written as a security engineer. It's going to scream, I am a security engineer. And I'll tell you right now, because companies have been burnt so much, when they see that, they see anything like a area that everyone loves putting at the top, technical areas of expertise. You have that on your CV, and I can almost guarantee there is minimal chance of you getting a CISO position, because any hiring manager, any executive is going to see that. They're going to go, this person is a security engineer pretending to be a CISO. We've been there. We've done that. It's a disaster. We are not going to go down that route again. We are not going to play that game. So you want to go in and completely gut it so it screams CISO, CISO, CISO. And the question I always get, but Eric, if I've been security engineer or even a ISO or deputy or manager or those different roles, but I've mainly been a security engineer, you're telling me I'm stuck. No. Here's what I'm saying. If you've been in this area for more than 5 years, even if your titles were engineer, senior analyst, deputy manager, whatever it is, most likely, if you really look at your job, it was 80 to 85% technical, true security engineer stuff, and 15 to 20% strategic business. Almost everyone has briefed managers and executives. Almost everyone has put together a budget. Almost everyone has managed a project. Almost everyone has built a strategy. It might have been once, it might have been a small piece of your job, it might have been something you were part of a team, but I can almost guarantee if you've worked in this arena for more than 5 years, you've done some of it. So all we're doing here is this. When you're putting together a CV for a CISO, we're focusing on the 15, 20%. The things you did a small part of, but you still did. We're not lying. We're not making stuff up, but the small part of your job, that's what we're honing in on, and we're ignoring the 80%. That's the paradigm shift that we're making and has to occur. The next reality is we talked about it being a business position, not a technical position. Next reality is it's a strategic position, not a technical tactical position. You are not focused on technical tactical. You are focused on high-level solutions and overall strategies that can be implemented across the company. Big shift, because I see a lot of security engineers struggle. Typical security engineer, it's getting better. Typical security engineer walks in to a meeting on a new project, a new idea, and they're immediately, there's a vulnerability. There's a vulnerability. There's an issue. Their job is to point out risks and weaknesses to that team so they understand where the exposures are and why this represents a risk to the company. When you're a CISO, your job, running your team, and when you show up to meetings, is to go, okay, here's how you do it securely. You're not pointing out problems or issues, because let's face it, at the end of the day, identifying risks, identifying issues, and identifying problems is good, but it is not helpful at moving the ball forward, and as a business person, it impedes the process of making revenue. So if we put the pieces together, what we've talked about, if CISO is a business person, moving the needle forward on revenue for the success of the company, then it would only make sense that you're focused on strategic solutions that let you get that revenue as quick as possible. So as a CISO, you're focused on and training your team on how can we come up with a solution or a strategy to allow this to happen in the safest, most secure manner so we can make as much money, as much revenue, and as much profit as we possibly can. So it's putting all those pieces together. Once again, lots of fun, but it's a huge shift that you need to recognize. Next thing that's very important. When you are playing at the chief officer level, there are lots of internal politics that you have to be aware of. There's a lot of folks that are jockeying for who's going to be the next CEO, COO, who's going to get the most budget, who's going to get the next revenue, who's going to get these positions and that position. So you have to recognize that you are not just there to provide advice and details. You need to be super savvy on the politics. You need to be super savvy at reading people and understanding who's trying to accomplish what agenda, and make sure that you are very careful on which sides you're picking and who you're backing or not backing. Because the reality is security is a great strategic weapon that somebody who's playing politics is going to want to use. If I'm a vice president and I want to become the next COO, and there's another vice president who's competing, what better way than me to team up with security to try to say, listen, I'm really concerned about this project of this other VP that I'm competing with, but I don't tell you that. I just say I'm really concerned about that project because I don't know security, but you do, Mr. or Mrs. CISO, and it just seems like that's a huge risk to the company. It just seems like there's so many vulnerabilities and exposures that it just doesn't seem like a smart thing to do. And if you don't understand and know politics, you're like, oh, they're being helpful, they're nice, and so what are you going to do? You're going to start being more aggressive on going after that other VP's project. And you're going to try to find risks and vulnerabilities because, hey, this other VP pointed it out to you. And in reality, they were using you to torpedo that project so that VP isn't successful to help them in their political career. So these are the other things you need to recognize, that when you're becoming a CISO and you're playing at that top echelon level, there is lots of politics and lots of things you have to be aware of. What is the biggest one? Depending on how, when, and the timing of the company creating a CISO, often your biggest enemy is the CIO. Because in a lot of cases, security was under the CIO. The CIO owned all tech. So any technical decisions, anything involving technology, anything involving uptime availability, because that's what a CIO is rewarded for, falls under him or her. They loved the fact that security was under them because they know the number one impact to uptime availability is security. If security forces an out of cycle patch, if security forces an update to software, if security forces changes or modifications to preventive devices like firewalls, every one of those things could negatively impact uptime availability. So they want that under them so they can keep a pressure on the neck. They can limit you from doing that. When you say, we must apply this out-of-cycle patch, and you know your uptime availability numbers and it's too risky, you can control it. You can say no. So as a CIO, you are in a control position. As companies realize this is a conflict and this doesn't work, there's huge political battles when you try to peel security away from the CIO and now make them equal. Or in some cases, the CIO now falls under the CISO. You really think they're happy and thrilled that that happened? Absolutely not. So in a lot of cases, and I saw this when I worked at my first company, my first telecom, and we took security away from the vice president of IT. Oh, he hated me with a vengeance because he thought that I basically took part of his division and now I'm making his life that much more difficult, when in reality, he was burying, ignoring, and not doing anything focused on security to preserve his uptime availability. And it was starting to hurt the company. And when we basically realized that, and I came forward, he was not happy with that. So he was one of my worst political enemies, always trying to push me off, get me into trouble, or cause problems. So you need to recognize this is a reality. Playing politics is part of the job. So I just wanted to spend a little time, because like I said, I more and more hear everyone, I want to be a CISO, I want to be a CISO, I want to be a CISO, but they don't really step back and understand the realities. So now that you understand the reality, now the question is, what do you really want? What do you really enjoy? And are those aligned with being a Chief Information Security Officer?